This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
Police in Las Vegas found themselves in the middle of a UFO mystery last month after an
One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious.
I don't know. Do you see him now, sir? Yes, I'm looking right at him. Okay, hang on. He's right. Is he in your yard, sir? Yeah, good. He's big. Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
Mythical Legends Podcast with your host Daniel Barnett.
Hey guys, and welcome to another Mythical Legends podcast. Today we have an awesome guest, and I've been trying to get this guest on for God knows how long. And we are, as a Mythical Legends team, so glad to have this guest on, and we'll have a great podcast. So let's bring him in, and let's not wait any longer. Please welcome Ronny LeBlanc.
Hey, buddy.
How are you, mate?
Great. Good to see you.
Good, mate. Amazing. So, I have so many questions, and so I've been waiting about a year and a half now to ask you these questions. So, I'm gonna get straight in. So,
fire away.
What was your inspiration to start researching the cryptid and paranormal world?
You know, for me, I was a little bit younger than you, and I had an experience in the forest near my home. And it was very paranormal, supernatural. I was very familiar with all the different animals that were around in New England. And I was by myself on my bike. And I entered this trail that I always would avoid because it just had this ominous feeling about it. And I would avoid it. And I was feeling really brave, went down this trail, and instantly noticed that there were not any animal sounds. I wasn't seeing like squirrels running about. It just seemed like a dead zone. I felt like I was being watched, and it got to a point where I continued on the trail on my bike, and I stopped because it came to like a choke point, and I was really hesitant to move any further, but I almost felt like I hit like some sort of a wall in a sense, where it just was a feeling like, don't go any further. And so I stopped. I had both feet on the ground. The forest erupts to the left of me, and I see trees and shrubs moving, and it's leading right to the trail in front of me, which is open, and out comes nothing and continues on the other side of the trail and trees and shrubs. And my mind was like, what just, like if anyone's seen the movie The Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger or the remake, similar to that, I didn't see an outline or shimmering. I saw nothing, but I could feel the footsteps reverberate through the soles of my feet. I could see the environment being altered by this thing moving stuff around. And I expected a moose to come out on the trail, and there was nothing. So I went right back home. I didn't go meet my friends. I didn't tell my parents about it. I was trying to understand what I experienced, but the rational brain sometimes doesn't have an answer for it, and it just seems to go into your subconscious. And so I've always been interested in this stuff when it comes to Bigfoot, cryptids, UFOs, and I would just go to the library and read so much stuff about it. But I think that was a moment where I didn't think Bigfoot. I just thought it had to be some kind of animal, and I didn't really understand it. But I think that really propelled me forward to start reading and researching and diving into all this stuff. I just had this, like yourself, you kind of get bit by the bug, and then you can't stop. You want to understand and read everything you can. You're just obsessed by it. And that's what really just put me on this trail. And there's been several times where I try to get off of the trail, and the universe seemed to pull me right back in. So it seems to be my path or my purpose for this time being,
Yeah, and say, Ronny, the amount of times I've tried to pull myself out, but once you're in the bubble, I don't think you can then escape. I don't think there's a
Yeah.
hole. I don't think you can. It's impossible.
There's certain people that are supposed to be in that bubble, like yourself, like me, like RPG and others, that there's a reason for it. And sometimes we may not understand the full bigger picture of it, but it's definitely some magnetic pull to it.
Yeah, and say, were you scared at that moment when something was around you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, I was terrified because I just didn't understand it. I would rather have seen something so that I knew what I was dealing with. So the fact that I didn't see anything was really perplexing. And I was always a scared kid growing up. I would have night terrors. I would have sleep paralysis. I would just feel like, it was just very uncomfortable for me to deal with some of this stuff. I started camping when I was younger and very like the equivalent to the Boy Scouts, doing stuff like that. But I was still very fearful. And then it got to a point where I remember roller coasters, for example. I had my first time kind of doing it, terrified, almost felt like I fell out of the thing when I was a kid. And so I wouldn't do them again. But then there was one moment in time where it was like, okay, we're going to face your fear and we're going to do it. And I rode the roller coaster. I was doing loops and everything else. And I just remember laughing and just kind of like enjoying the moment and realizing, what was I being afraid of? This is fun. And so that was like a moment where I used that as an analogy, where that then led me to have a little bit more courage, face my fear, get out of your comfort zone and go forward. And I use that kind of to approach every part of my life where something seems a little scary. The obstacle is the path, as they say. So it's like you have to kind of face it, go through it, and then you transform, you become stronger, and then the next challenge. So now I don't get afraid. I get excited because I want to see things. I'm ready to see things. And I've seen some crazy stuff throughout this whole process. And I know there's going to be more things I'll see and others will as well. So it's exciting. Now I'm just like, let's go.
Yeah, and say it sounds like amazing that and say it. I always say I'm not the biggest believer in paranormal, but if something comes out in front of me, I don't see it, I will believe it immediately, and say I'm more on kind of both. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, what has to happen typically with most people, I'll believe it when I see it, right?
Yeah.
You have to experience it yourself. And I had experiences where I'm very convinced, I'm very convicted when it comes to the paranormal side and the high strangeness of Bigfoot, because one, I've done my research for all these years, but I've also had my personal experiences with others next to me. And there's no explanation for what we experience other than it being supernatural or paranormal. And there's just a lot we just don't understand about our planet, the oceans, what's lurking in there, what people are seeing. And this is something people have been encountering for 400 plus years, maybe more, the indigenous people in North America. And they have their stories and connections that these things are somewhat paranormal. They talk about the star people coming down and all this. So I think it just takes time for you to kind of have that experience. And then there's a paradigm shift where your worldview changes and you kind of go, okay, there's something else going on with these things.
Yeah, mate, definitely. Now, I have my eye on two things right here. So I move on to this, mate, and go so number one, how did you start writing your book, and kind of what was the inspiration for it?
Yeah. One, I never intended to write a book. I had no desire to write a book. I'm a big reader. I love reading, but I never kind of picture myself as being a writer for books. I went to film school. I wanted to write movies, and that was kind of my focal point. And what ended up happening is I had a conversation with a friend of mine about living in California. I was out in California for about 10 years, Southern California. And he asked, what was the best place in California that you've been to? And I mentioned the Redwood Forest. And I said something to the fact that, it's so prehistoric looking that you could almost imagine something like a Sasquatch running across, and he's like, wait, what? And started laughing and talking about Bigfoot, because out here on the East Coast, it's not as accepted. There's a lot of stigma, but in the Pacific Northwest, it's very accepted. People talk about it. You see Bigfoot stuff everywhere. And it's starting to change out here, but for him, he was dying laughing about it. And it was synchronicity, because 7 days later, his brother and his wife were out in Leominster State Forest by themselves, and they uncovered 6 footprints with visible toes. They were about 10 and a half inches long, 5 inches across. But what startled him, this guy Bill, he's a hunter. There was a 6-foot stride between each of these footprints, and they were in a straight line. And if you look at some of these trackways that are believed to be Sasquatch trackways, they're in a straight line. The stride or the gait, it just seems a little bit difficult for us to reproduce. And so I ended up going back with him. He was terrified to go back in the woods, even though he has a gun. He's a hunter. He wanted other people to come with him that were armed. And we relocated those tracks. He was hesitant and didn't really think that we were going to find them at first. Rediscover them, which we did. I brought a little bit of plaster material, enough to do one of those footprints. We casted one of those, and then we put this up on the BFRO's website. I was very adamant with Bill. Put your report together, your experience, be accurate with the time as much as possible, the day, the location, and put it out there. Put your pictures out there, because there could be other people that have had sightings or encounters in that area that you're going to help corroborate with you sharing your information, and vice versa. And so when we did that, one of the investigators for the BFRO reached out, Dr. David Brake, who surprisingly was a consultant with the Department of Defense and had interest in Bigfoot, owned a company in Connecticut, still does, that does a lot of work with blood and things like this. But he deemed, hey, this thing's authentic. Finding Bigfoot, which they were about to do their season 2, was coming to Rhode Island, and they asked us to come and bring the print. And we actually cut out the earth where this print was. So when you took the cast out of the earth, you saw how deep the cavity was. It was really impressive for them to see it. So they were like, hey, we're going to move our shooting schedule from New York to Boston, to the Leominster area, and come out. And so for us getting on that, and then the local paper did a story about the find and showing up on Finding Bigfoot. And then once the episode came out, once we did a radio show and the newspapers, people started reaching out and saying, hey, I have an experience I haven't told anybody, or I've told maybe a few people, and this happened 20 years ago in the same stretch of woods. Let me talk to you about it. And suddenly I'm compiling all these stories and things that are coming through. And I had met somebody in a bookstore in New York who told me that I would write a book, but I wouldn't be ready for a couple of years. And she proclaimed to be a witch. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I buy this, But then, 2 years later, here I am putting this thing together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she was right. I'm writing a book. But my approach to the book was, I have read so many different books on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and a lot of the authors had never seen one or never had an experience, and they had a very really didn't take a stance, or they took at the end of the book, kind of made the stance, oh, I'm not saying there is, there isn't. And I wanted to see and read a book from someone that was very pro in regards to, this is probable, this is possible, and here's why. And for me, no one had really written about stuff that was going on in Massachusetts for UFOs and Bigfoot and these orbs, which I thought there was a connection with this. So that's what really would put me on the path to kind of like, all right, I want to approach this as someone that's a believer, that's writing it for other people that have had experiences, and wrote it for a skeptic. So there's so much research and so much evidence in this thing that at the end of the book, if I haven't even got you somewhat curious, or that you haven't even considered that this could be a possibility, I haven't done my job. So I want to create this curiosity where it's almost, you know, like, hey, there were so many different sightings. Just one of these to be real brings this whole thing to life. So that was kind of my pursuit with writing the book. When I researched it for a couple of years, everything that went in there. It took me about 6 months to write it. I sat on it for another 6 months because I was afraid to put it out there in the world and to get the ridicule or to get the stigma from this. I was concerned about even my kids in school. Are they going to make fun of me and then make fun of my kids? So it became a real battle of the mind, in the sense of like, hey, once you do this, it's out there. And I just kind of like, at one point was like, let's do this. You're supposed to be on this path. This is part of it. Let's see what happens. And I wrote it really for myself, first and foremost, where I'd like, hey, here's my experiences, whatever, something I could leave behind, like a legacy for my kids or what have you, leave my mark. And I didn't expect it to go anywhere, really. And then suddenly got a lot of interest. The book started taking off. And then, you know, once I joined Expedition Bigfoot, then it really kind of went into the stratosphere. What people started to realize, you know, who I was, and kind of my stance too wasn't very popular in the Bigfoot world to kind of come on saying there's something with the high strangeness and the paranormal and UFOs and orbs, and people like, nope, this is an animal. Please stop talking about that, you know. But now you're seeing something else happening where other people are coming forward and go, you know what? We saw these orbs in our research area before we had the sighting, or this happened, and blah, blah, blah. So now people are starting to see that there's a deeper connection to this with other phenomena.
And say, every time I search you up on YouTube, Ronnie, you've got so many videos of your book, and so yeah, it's I'm not the biggest reader, and I've got probably about 50 books in here, and I'm not the biggest reader, but when I flick through them, it's amazing. It really is. And say, I think having two sides to what Bigfoot could be, or what any cryptid could be, is amazing. And I think it's starting to change a lot of people's opinions. And say, yeah, I think your book's worked so much. I think it really has.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's just you know, being honest, having some courage, again, not being fearful and putting it out there. I've accepted the fact that there's going to be people that are going to, the book's going to resonate with them. They're going to feel like, yeah, I have a connection. This makes sense. And I believe. You can have other people that are going to read it and go, no way, this is real and whatever. And they would never believe in it. That's fine. But this is for people that are maybe on the fence or have an interest in this, and it's just another perspective. Other people like Ron Moorhead, he believes the same thing, and other researchers are kind of going in that same direction because they've had these experiences. They've talked to people that have had encounters, and people are experiencing strange things. The cloaking. For example, I do a lot of free library talks. So the libraries will pay me to come and speak, but then it's free for the public to come. And it's a way for me to talk about UFOs and Bigfoot. And a lot of people will either show me videos or photos or share their stories. And one individual had physical photos from the 90s, before we had, you know, early or before internet and everything. And so he had these photos. We're talking about 35 years now. And they were in Montana, him and his buddy. His buddy did not believe in Bigfoot. He did. And he goes, let's go in the woods. It's 4:30 in the morning. Let's go. Let's see if we can stir something up. So they did. And then after a little while, they started getting paralleled and followed. And he thought it was a bear, and they're trying to see what it looked like. And when they were making their way on the trail, something was following them, but was walking sideways, facing them like this. And bears can't walk sideways. So he started to take photos. And he brought these photos and showed me. And they are amazing. He's going to get me copies of these things. But basically, he took a photo of this thing, face on. You can see this dark silhouette of a shadow. You can make out these eyes. You can make out the nose. And one thing he was talking about, there were some different orbs that were in the photo. But this image, the upper torso of this Bigfoot was visible. Below it was not. It was invisible. And he thought something happened with the camera. And I said, no, you captured it half cloaked. They're interdimensional beings. And what you actually captured was evidence of that. And he lost his mind because he goes, you solved this mystery for me for the past 30 years. I thought there was something wrong. But I said, no, you captured evidence of that. And some other photos were showing similar things. So what these things are, will we eventually find out? I think so. But they're definitely pointing to the weird side of things.
Yeah, 100%. That is a weird story, and thanks for making my night sleep even more brilliant, Ronnie. So you mentioned it whilst you were talking about your books, but from the TV program Expedition Bigfoot, you all have very unique skills and qualities, I should say. How do you use them collaboratively as a team?
Yeah, the big thing is respecting other people's beliefs and their paths. Russ is a flesh and blood type person and researcher. He's experienced some of the weird stuff since we started filming 4 or 5 years ago. Maria, scientist, again, hey, this is an animal. And again, she experienced some weird stuff. And with me, my lens and how I see things, very similar to Bryce. Bryce sees the kind of the big picture too, and just all these different stories and everything else. And I think collectively, when you have these different lenses working together and kind of seeing the bigger picture, what's cool about it is Maria can then go down in her lane, let's say, and what she's looking for. And then I can be looking for and then we kind of bring that together and go, okay, what do we have? So it's like a bunch of detectives working to figure something out, looking for evidence, trying to collect the facts, and then try to figure out that story. And I think it works really well. The fact that we're coming from these different approaches, because it needs to be, I think, looked at from a variety of different ways.
And I think Maria does really, really well coping with you.
And I do with her. Like she's, it can be frustrating at times. But again, I'm not there to change her opinion per se. She's going to have to go through something and she's already had these experiences where something invisible was charging towards her, seeing what looked like a Bigfoot across the river, with orbs hovering above its head that she couldn't see with the naked eye, but the thermal's picking it up. So she had a lot of these, encounters that just don't make sense. And it's like, welcome to the club, because that's what other people are experiencing as well.
Yeah. And say, what is your favorite moment, Ronnie, in the whole of Expedition Bigfoot?
I talk about this in my presentations, and I'm very proud to have captured with Maria the shadow. And the shadow that I'm talking about was in season 3 in Washington State, where we went back to the location. And yes. And what a lot of people don't know, because the network edited it out, was throughout the process, as we're moving along this river, rocks were falling on the opposite side of us. They were never to the right. It was never to the left. It was directly across from us every time we moved down. And it got to a point at night where I had yelled up to it, and I said, "We know you're up there. Show yourself." And moments later, what sounded like an avalanche of rocks, Maria and I turned in the direction of the sound with our flashlights. And what we captured, there was nothing in front of us but the river and then the rock wall. And if you've ever done a shadow puppet as a kid with a flashlight and you project that shadow on the wall, what we experienced was that, but we couldn't see the hand between our flashlight that's creating that shadow on the rock wall. Now, what I saw, and Maria saw it as well, I wish I could take my eyeballs and put them into the camera, but I saw a shadow that had a conical shaped head, that had arms and legs, that walked like the Patterson Gimlin film. And the shadow, I could see hair in the shadow on the rock wall. So this thing was hairy. And I was like, oh my gosh. And if you watch that clip and go back, you will see a shadow reflection in the water below this. So this thing was not just, like a shadow that we created. It was almost a 3D dimensional shadow that was there that was reflected in the water. So it provided another piece of evidence that it was there.
Wow.
And what we think we captured was potentially a mother was up top or a father type figure. And we captured what we think was a juvenile that was below and walked across. But the thing that got me a little upset was the fact that the network edited that out, because that would say, one, the result that we got was a reaction from my action saying, show yourself. It would also determine that they understand English. So for him to show itself, because I said, show yourself, and it was like, it did, that was not like a coincidence. That was it understanding and then actually revealing itself a little bit.
Yeah, and that could prove something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that believe that these things are, a lot of the tribes believe that they are the first humans to ever walk the earth. They're ones that decided to not go down the evolutionary chain, but to stay in this kind of realm. And there's others that believe that they are something that's more alien or interdimensional, whatever we want to label this. Some people believe that they're like elementals, like fairies or the fae. And they could be all of these things because people are getting eDNA, like yourself. They're getting footprints, hair samples. So they're leaving physical impressions. They're doing different things. They're altering landscapes with these structures, but they're also disappearing right before people's eyes, vanishing, and doing things that just don't seem to follow the laws of physics.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say at that point, going back to the shadow, having that in that episode, and I know every episode inside out, but when you're stood there, it would then make that episode better, because then people then go, if they could understand this kind of language that we're speaking, that could in one way prove something. And it's like several things coming together. So you've got eDNA, you've got hair, you've got footprints, and then that it starts to create like a package.
Yes.
So then go, do you get what I mean?
Like the Sierra sounds that Ron Moorhead and Al Berry captured in the 70s. Cryptolinguist Scott Nelson, retired from the U.S. Navy, was saying, hey, I'm listening to this banter between these two individuals, and he goes, there's a language, there's communication, there's phrases and words. I talked to Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum about this when we were in Florida a couple years ago for the conference that you're about to do next month. He said that there was a Japanese language scholar and a Native American language scholar that were both recognizing either certain words or phrases that were being uttered between the two. So there's a lot of tribes that talk that the Sasquatch knows or is speaking some form of a Native American language
Wow.
that it has picked up over time, either from the local tribes and working with them, or just listening to them. So that's pretty fascinating stuff, because then it goes down this route of these things being or somewhat human like in some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form.
100%, and say that would make sense, and say at the moment I'm going on as logic as I possibly can,
Yeah.
and it's beginning to get to the point where I can't come back to logic, but that would then go, it would make sense. It would make sense for them to learn from kind of us,
Yeah.
and learn from what we do, or who knows, did we learn from them?
Right.
It's something that is unknown, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
And I've seen, man, over the past couple of years, just different photos like the one I mentioned earlier from the guy that was in Montana, to videos. One particular video that I'm trying my best to get my hands on is something I saw a couple of years ago that was up in Maine, recorded by the Maine Bigfoot Society. There was a gentleman that was filming. I think he was a half a mile or a mile away using a telephoto lens, broad daylight. And there's a trail. And suddenly here comes this enormous Bigfoot comes walking into the scene. Long arms. I mean, it looks 7 to 8 feet tall. I'm like, whoa. He goes, wait, watch. And then here comes another one behind it, a little bit smaller. And I'm like, oh my gosh. He's like, wait, watch. And then here comes the little baby, comes running up behind them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I watched it, like 20 times, and it looked authentic. And we're actually doing a camping, a squatching and sky watching event up in Maine. We're doing a couple of weekends in August and September. And we're actually going to be in this location where that video was taken. So I'm excited to go in these different spots where there's been some amazing evidence that's been pulled from there. So hopefully we will encounter something cool. And
Hope so.
there's no doubt in my mind that someone like yourself or other researchers out there are going to capture some incredible video, photographic evidence. It's just going to keep on piling up.
Yeah, 100%. And to kind of switch focus for a minute, because I know you do a lot more than just Bigfoot. Let's switch to UFOs. Now, something that baffles me and baffles a lot of kind of my team, and kind of going, we know how to research Bigfoot and we know how to kind of, but how do you go about researching UFOs, and how do you kind of do you just stand there and look up, or
Very, very similar to Bigfoot, in the sense that when it comes to Bigfoot and UFOs, you don't have to go too far sometimes. So, and what I mean by that is they seem to be attracted to people as well. If you put out your intention, if you go into an area that's been known to have different sightings, there's a good chance that you may encounter something if you are, kind of open to that. A lot of times you have to be at the right place at the right time. But one thing that I started experimenting with was actually setting up my camera, my phone, and filming in slow motion. And when you do that and point it to a section of the sky, sometimes you'll start seeing things that are not bugs. You'll see a bird flying like this, right, in slow motion. And then you'll see something go that you wouldn't have seen in your normal vision. So these things are moving at speeds that are, just incredible. But there's stuff that's happening all around. They do leave. There's been reported landings of craft. They do leave some sort of radiation. There's been spots where the sand has, gone to extreme temperatures where you have vitrification, where it almost becomes glass.
Wow.
And then you also have people that have had experiences, and they might have had radiation. These people are talking about they have almost like tracking devices that are on them. And it gets kind of scary in that front. There's definitely an interest when it comes to the government, when it comes to this stuff. And a lot of the information that's out there in the UFO world is in some of these older books. And so you have to do a little bit digging when it comes to this stuff. Not everything's going to be, uploaded on YouTube, and things are slowly getting there. But there's a lot of stuff that's kind of hidden when it comes to this. And again, some of these early researchers like John Keel and others were talking about these craft being interdimensional as well. Like they seem to pop in and pop out. But there's something to it. We're either being observed by these things. There's different stories and theories now that they could be us, coming back from the future. And the reason why that's starting to get a little bit more traction for me, when I hear that, I go, wow, that's still so egocentric to think that there still can't be aliens. It has to be us from the future, right? Like, why can't there be other things? But the reason they're going down this route, from what I've heard from people that are in the know, is that these crash retrieval programs and these biologics, these pilots that they recovered from these crash retrievals, when they've done DNA extraction and studied them, they've found that they have human DNA.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's shocking.
So they could be another type of human from another planet. We could really be the aliens on this planet. So it's interesting. It's starting to go in that direction. Those different theories. And I do feel like I've been talking about this. I anticipate a large scale UFO sighting that multiple countries are going to see at the same time. And I think of an event that's coming up in a few weeks that might be the date. And that's the solar eclipse on April 8th. Everyone's going to be looking up. We're going to have darkness for 4.5 minutes. And NASA has asked people to pay attention during the eclipse. They're expecting, we have 2 different types of cicadas that are emerging from their slumber, 18 years, 15 years, whatever it is. And what we're also hearing is on that day of that solar eclipse, the path in which people are going to see it runs along all the different cities called Nineveh. So there's a Nineveh, Indiana, there's a Nineveh, and this is a book in the Bible. And so there's something biblical about this. There was also someone that mentioned that the April 8th date is the same day going back how many years that we had one of the plagues with the locusts that came out in the Bible.
Wow.
So I don't know how accurate that is and how you could actually figure that out. But we're hearing about this could be a really interesting event. Maybe something will become of it. Maybe people will actually witness a UFO, and then this, so
Hope so.
that'd be pretty awesome. But I do, the recent report from the Pentagon that came out said that there's no extraterrestrials. There's no aliens. And I think some of those labels too, because people have talked about, well, they are here already. They are hiding out in our oceans. They're not extraterrestrial. They're terrestrial. They're from here. They've been here for a long time. So the stories of Atlantis and these different things start to you go, was this starting to make sense of what's going on? And the whole adage of the truth is stranger than fiction seems to be coming into play.
And say, just going back a minute to when you said the like in old books and kind of is where, well, we went to the library few days ago to do a dig on Bigfoot here in the UK, and I sent you a message immediately to say we found in an old book history of Bigfoot here in the UK, and I go,
the Green Man, right? The
Yeah,
different names
yeah,
for these things.
yeah. So it's in the books. You've got
Yeah,
history of something, which makes it more plausible and makes kind of go, well, look, we've got evidence here from about, and this book was written in 1999. So this we're talking 20 odd years ago. Someone had the idea to put that in there. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's
And
mm,
I think too, like the Green Man is believed to be something that's kind of almost like a forest spirit of sorts. And we hear
mm,
similar stories like that from the Native Americans about what Bigfoot is, um, being something more spiritual, more evolved, what have you. So it's really interesting. It's this is one big mystery too, because it really kind of starts focusing on us, right? Where do we come
mm,
from? Why are we here? Where do we go after we're done here? And so these are, no one really has these answers. We've been told from certain people that have seen the other side and things like this, but it really starts to beg the question of like why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing
mm,
here and learning and understanding. So
yeah. And
if
say
anything, it's been a lot of fun.
scary but fun, yeah.
Mm, yeah.
And so as I'm on that topic, um, now I know you've never been to the UK before, and that will change in a few
Yeah.
weeks.
Yes.
But what do you think about Bigfoot here in the UK?
I think that it is highly probable. And you look at the map of the world and the sightings of Bigfoot in Australia. They have the Yowie and the Yeren in China. Why not England? Why not Europe?
Mm, yeah.
And especially if these things are interdimensional, if they are connected to UFOs, and there's a lot of UFO sightings around your area and things like this, they don't need huge force to kind of hide in. They can appear in a small forest like Monsterland, which is down the road, Leominster State Forest. It's
Mm,
5,000 acres. It's not an enormous spot. There's a lot of hiding places and things like this, but it would explain why people are seeing Bigfoot and these things in areas where it doesn't seem like there's a lot of places to hide. And so that would
mm,
tend to lean towards, is there something else going on where these things can kind of like appear and disappear and things like that. And again, it's hard to wrap your head around. One thing
yeah.
is like the understanding that there's something that we're told is like the boogeyman or the monster that's living out in the woods
Mm,
that people are seeing. And then you're trying to accept the fact, oh, that this thing is an alien or something else. So it's like, let me just understand this first before I go to this next level. And so sometimes when you put it all together, people like, a lot of people think there's only one Bigfoot like that's
mm,
showing up like the Loch Ness Monster. And that's just not the case. There's, I believe, thousands of them throughout North America, different regions and areas. There seems to be pods and family units. So the number could even be higher than that.
mm, yeah. And say it's just one big mystery when you think about it.
Yeah.
And when someone says like, um, oh, there's nothing, I go, okay, have a look into it then, and go. It's like there's a lot of kind of even we have the mystery of, let's say, big cats around here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And say people go, oh no, it's not true. I go, we saw one down the road, and it's like just getting a lot of people to kind of accept that we could have something. We could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
That's a great example, the mountain lion, right? So we have, at one point in time in North America, there were jaguars.
wow.
They were in Southwest Arizona, New Mexico, and then they migrated. They started getting killed. All the hunters, you can see photos of all these pelts of all these jaguars, and they went
Mm,
down south. Now they're starting to come back up. We also had the eastern mountain lion, which they said is now extinct. It doesn't exist. But my daughter and her boyfriend are driving home, and one ran across the road in front of them with this long tail. There was one that was hit by a car by a lady in Connecticut maybe 8 years ago, and they had a body, and they still said they don't exist. So if they're willing to go that far with just mountain lions that we can see, and we're actually hitting with what when it comes to Bigfoot, yeah, they don't exist either. But
yeah,
forestry workers are finding footprints, and there's almost like this underground railroad. Leominster was part of that, where they were hiding and moving slaves and getting them to get out of here to go to Canada. There also seems to be, and I remember there was an article that emerged, I think it might have been the Humboldt Times or some newspaper from Northern California not too long ago, that there are some individuals that are almost acting like an underground railroad where they're protecting these Bigfoot. They're interacting with them, or they're habituating with them, and they don't want to reveal their location for people to come in and try to kill them or hunt them. So they're literally trying to help provide and hide these things.
yeah.
So I thought that was pretty fascinating, if that is true and legit.
Yeah, and say it's all kind of, it all merges into one. I think it's what gives me is, I think it's what gives you kind of the push to go, well, what is this? It's creating something, and
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I think it's to kind of think that there could be something out there.
Oh yeah.
And now going to back to kind of experiences and kind of let's say paranormal caught on camera. John, tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about.
Yeah. What's really cool about that is I have the privilege of reviewing these videos from all over the world, and to see Bigfoot stuff, cryptids. My favorite are these UFO videos that are daylight videos, blue sky, and you're seeing like this clear craft moving around, or different things. Those are always fascinating. From my experience, it seems like there's been an uptick in sightings and activity. More people are seeing stranger things, and they talk about like the veil between these two worlds getting thinner during certain times. We're seeing like the poles are starting to shift. So there's an interesting time that's happening right now. But I've definitely seen some weird stuff. We've also seen what we could describe as thunderbirds, my wife and I. They were made of what looked like plasma or fire, and they were the size of buses, and they were chasing each other in the sky like dolphins swimming in the ocean. That's one thing I wish that I had pulled my phone out and started recording, but I was so stunned at what we were watching. It was like we were on the set of a science fiction film. Me and my wife looked at each other like, what is happening right? And we watched these things go, and then we see this green ball, this UFO, all silent, not making a sound, following these things. And she captured a video, maybe 12 seconds, of the smaller one kind of moving and following these. What people are seeing is not necessarily, when it comes to UFOs, nuts and bolts and craft. Some of these things seem to be living beings. There were reports of jellyfish in the sky in the early 1900s in Massachusetts, that people were seeing stuff like that should be in the ocean that's in the sky. I interviewed a witness who's had a lifetime of UFO experiences and Bigfoot stuff. And she experienced what she described as a jellyfish at night float from out of the forest, glowing, and come to her window with tentacles and all this stuff, and then turn and go away. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You know, things that you just don't even have. Like, where do you look for that? Like jellyfish. You know, it just seems to be weirder. And there's a gentleman that he's a hunter. He's he's close by, next town over, but he was hunting in a forest known as Blood Forest. Anything that has these weird names like devils or hells and all this. And when he was hunting, this being would appear, like materialize, and be watching him from behind the trees. And I thought he was talking about like a smaller Bigfoot type creature.
Mm.
And his brother was telling me this. This guy was very afraid to talk to anybody. And he's like, yeah, he has pictures. I'm like, he has pictures? And so he showed me a picture from his brother, showed me a picture that he had taken. And it was an elf. It was an elf with a hat and shoes running away.
What?
Yes. And this thing actually followed him to his house. He lived not too far from this hunting area, and he would go to the same spot in this hunting area. And this being would show up almost like he's invading his property or something. And when he's decided to stop hunting and going to those woods is when he got home and turned around and saw this thing was in his, like, off in the backyard, had followed him home. So, yeah, that's kind of when you're like, yeah, I'm all done.
I'm never going to sleep again. It puts me, it's like 3 days a week I'm like, I'm unsure whether it's paranormal or not, but then it's that small percentage I then go, there is some weird stuff going on out there, and you just can't explain it.
And your neck of the woods too, there's a long history. I'm excited to get out there and kind of see what else is going on, because you talk about these big cats, right? There's different stories, different regions out here where there's been sightings of people seeing a Bigfoot with a big cat the size of African lions, like they are friends, like they are hunting together. So there's stories of that. And I wouldn't be surprised that we maybe see something like that when we're out there. And there's a lot of weirdness going on for sure. And just a matter of people capturing it to show other people, like, look what we've seen. It's not just the story. It's now there's evidence. So
yeah, it's mad. And I think it's just, I think we may solve some mysteries, but I think some mysteries, I just think are too kind of far to kind of.
Yes, and I think you're right with that. I think some of these mysteries are meant to never be solved. It's to get us to kind of go on this like little loop or something, because there's researchers that have been doing this for 40, 50 years, and now they're down another rabbit hole. You know, like they're just kind of like, they started off looking for an ape, unknown primate, unclassified animal, and now they're like, I don't know what this is, because there's some weird stuff that's going on.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. So Ronnie, my last question for you is, in the future, could you tell us about a few of the conferences that you're gonna be at, and your future plans?
Yeah, you know, right now I'm doing a bunch of talks throughout Massachusetts, free library tour. I have some conferences that are coming up, like Bigfoot Days in Colorado with Renee and Russ from the show. And I have some other things like Michigan Paracon. So I do a variety of talks on Bigfoot, but also UFOs, paranormal hotspots. So I end up getting invited to these other paranormal conferences that aren't necessarily just Bigfoot focused. So that's always fun, because then you're talking to other people that maybe are ghost hunters or UFO researchers that are like, oh, I want to learn about the Bigfoot side of things. And so that's been great. But yeah, I'm excited to come and hang with you and your fam in a few weeks. It's gonna be awesome.
Yes. I can't begin to say how excited I am for that. It's something brand new, and you are going to like the kind of forest part of it, but then when you realize that it's going to be cold and rainy, then you'll feel sorry for yourself, mate.
No, it sounds like New England weather. It sounds like Massachusetts, so I'll fit right at home.
Amazing. So, Ronnie, this podcast's been amazing, and I've been waiting so long, ever since I watched the first episode
Amazing.
of Expedition Bigfoot. It's been amazing. So, Ronnie, is there anything else that you would like to say to our viewers before we sign off?
Sure. I mean, my big thing is keep an open mind. Keep on believing that we're going to learn about these things. I think people like yourself just, starting this new path forward and getting other people to be a little bit fearless and just kind of come forward and talk about these things. People are seeing things that they don't have an explanation for. They need an outlet for these things. And you're the new wave of these researchers that are going to be spearheading a lot of this research. So it's important for people like myself, RPG, Renee, and others to support you, motivate you, like get you excited, and be there for references and things like that, where we can help out any way we can, because it is one big community and we're starting to see more people working together. And that's the only way we're going to discover and find the truth about this whole thing.
Definitely. And my one theory on it is the more people we get involved, the better.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love it.
Wow, amazing. Right, Ronnie, this podcast has been incredible, and thank you to all our viewers, and don't forget to subscribe to the Mythical Legends YouTube channel. Keep searching and stay mythical. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Thank you.